Welcome to the Wade Center Podcast,
a podcast of Wheaton College.
Welcome to the Wade Center Podcast. I am your host, Jim Beitler. I'm here with my co-host, Aaron Hill.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Yeah.
It's Friday afternoon, and
It's a Friday, and we're struggling.
Yeah, we are. But we're here, and we're here for it. We're talking about books.
Yeah. Books get us excited.
Yeah, and these are books that are worth rereading.
Part two
of books worth rereading. You might remember in our first round, we asked our listeners, you, to write in and tell us the books that you think are worth rereading, and you did that.
Yeah.
We got some great responses from people.
Yeah, we got some good picks, and we're going to weave them in throughout the episode as we talk about some of the books that we didn't get to talk about the first time around.
That's right. So we're going to go to the mailbag and pull out some of your responses to books worth rereading. Maybe we should start there.
Yeah.
Let's just start right off the bat. We got one from Melody. Melody gave us a list of 5. I won't read all 5, but her top choice was Revelations of Divine Love by Julian of Norwich.
Yeah, it's a classic. C.S. Lewis loved her.
Is that right?
Julian of Norwich, yeah.
So here's what Melody writes, and she writes. She has others like Lord of the Rings, Anne of Green Gables, and Little Women.
Yeah.
This is what she writes. This is Melody. As T.S. Eliot wrote in Little Gidding, and these are the lines from T.S. Eliot, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And then Melody says, I find this to be true in my rereading. And she says, one of the reasons I love characters who go on journeys, as in Lord of the Rings, and those who grow up, and I think she means by grow up in their stories, like Anne Shirley and Jo March, is because they're always changing and therefore more alive to my imagination. That's really good.
Yeah.
And she says, reading these books for the second, third, sixth time is a way to know them and myself for the first time. So kind of just going on these journeys with characters is something we do over the course of our lives.
Yeah, definitely.
And books change as we come to them at different seasons.
Yeah, because we bring different problems and different thoughts. And you know, if we're being honest, we're a different person when we show up with each of these books.
Yeah, I don't remember when it was, but after we had James, my son, I read the Abraham and Isaac story, and a switch had been flipped.
Yeah.
For the reading of that story.
Yeah, it hits different.
Yeah.
Well, one book that we both brought last time that I thought would be maybe a good one to kick off with was Gilead. I looked across the table and I noticed that you had a copy of Gilead and I had a copy of Gilead by Marilynne Robinson.
We both brought it.
Yeah. And so I thought that would be a good one to talk through. Interestingly enough, Marilynne Robinson has been to the Wade Center. I met her. She was here for an event a couple years ago and got to look around the Wade Center and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
she was
really neat.
She was here on campus.
Yeah.
With, I think, another person who was one of my picks, Rowan Williams.
Yeah.
I think they came for a
They
shared
did.
event. You might be able to find that online.
Yeah.
So what do you like about Gilead?
So I think Gilead was a different novel to me. I started reading it, and I had a hard time reading it for some reason, and then I got an audio copy, and I started listening to it, and then I would switch between them. And there's something about the way it's written in letter form.
Yeah.
And this, older gentleman is writing these letters and chronicling this experience and stuff that for me, and this is going to sound weird, but it opened up a new way of thinking in my head. It put me in a different mindset of thinking about my own life in that kind of way, like how I would explain what I'm going through in the moment, and created a sort of self-reflection in me.
Yeah.
And then particularly a self-reflection because I had just come out of a time of being a pastor for 15, 16 years. And I was back here at Wheaton going to grad school, over again, back in school. I felt totally out of place. I really felt like an old man among all of these younger, 20-something kids and stuff that were going through, getting their first master's, and I was getting my second master's. And so, I related a lot to him in the sort of pastoral side, a lot of the interactions he has with people in his life, as a pastor and stuff like that. And so it was, without realizing it, I think it gave me some healing for some of the stuff that I had gone through when I was serving as a pastor to help me reflect and articulate that in my own head in a way. It was almost like therapy, but giving me the ability to kind of speak through that stuff.
It's not a fast-moving book.
Yeah.
but it just rewards the careful, slow reader.
Yeah.
And you just read these sentences, and it just feels like you're getting wisdom as you're reading it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good quotes in there too.
Yeah. So Marilynne Robinson, she creates this character, John Ames, as pastor, and he's just so lovingly drawn. You could just hear him as he's basically writing these letters.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about the book is just the attention that John Ames pays to the world.
Yeah.
He has just got an eye for seeing the beauty in existence. And it's just so powerful. There's a lot. I marked a page here. He's talking about joy. And he's writing this, and he says, I'm reminded of something I saw one morning a few years ago as I was walking up to the church. There was a young couple strolling half a block ahead of me. The sun had come up brilliantly after a heavy rain, and the trees were glistening and very wet. On some impulse, plain exuberance, I suppose, the fellow jumped up and caught hold of a branch, and a storm of luminous water came pouring down on the two of them, and they laughed and took off running. The girl sweeping water off her hair and her dress, as if she were a little bit disgusted, but she wasn't. It was a beautiful thing to see, like something from a myth. I don't know why I thought of that now, except perhaps because it is easy to believe in such moments that water was made primarily for blessing and only secondarily for growing vegetables or doing the wash. And then this is the I'm sorry, that was a lot, but
you're good. This is great.
This is the sentence I wanted to read. I wish I had paid more attention to it, more attention to water. My list of regrets may seem unusual, but who can know that they are really? This is an interesting planet. It deserves all the attention you can give it. Oh, it's so good.
It's good stuff. I wanted to share. Okay, we're gonna. You guys love reading quotes from books, so it's not. These aren't bad things. All right. So I wanted to read a quote. He says, "This is John Ames speaking, obviously, because he's writing these letters." He says, "People want to respect the pastor, and I'm not going to interfere with that. But I've developed a great reputation for wisdom by ordering more books than I ever had time to read, and reading more books by far than I've learned anything useful from, except, of course, that some very tedious gentlemen have written books. This is not a new insight, but the truth of it is something you have to experience to fully grasp." When I read that, coming again, like I said, from that world of the pastor, and then stepping into grad school and ordering a lot of books and reading, and then realizing I still had a lot of books on my shelf that I had never actually read, so I don't know. I just related a lot to that. So
that's fantastic. This is a top book for me. This is one I've been back to several times, and it just seems like so powerful every time I come back to it.
There's something about it that, like you said, gives you an appreciation for the world, but helps you get out of your own head in a positive way. Like it creates a self-reflection and an awareness and an observation of the world around you in a way that I think is really positive.
Yeah. And then Marilynne Robinson goes on to write more in that same world. Yes. And so there's more to discover there.
There's a trilogy of books.
Actually, she has a fourth.
Oh, there's a fourth?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Since we mentioned Rowan Williams.
Yeah.
I actually brought a Rowan Williams book. And Rowan Williams, just an amazing writer and thinker. This particular book is called Being Disciples, Essentials of the Christian Life. But his writing is just so insightful and at times just a prayer-like, meditative, kind of on the theme of paying attention. He's talking about prayer. He's talking about prayer. He's talking about discipleship. He says, disciples are expectant in the sense that they take it for granted that there is always something about to break through from the master, the teacher, something about to burst through the ordinary and uncover a new light on the landscape. So the teacher's going to reveal something. There's a hope, an expectancy that the teacher's going to reveal something. And then he says, reality is going to open up when you are in the master's company. And so your awareness, as has often been said by people writing about contemplative prayer, is a little bit like that of a bird watcher. The experienced birdwatcher, sitting still, poised, alert, not tense or fussy, knows that this is the kind of place where something extraordinary suddenly bursts into view. I love that.
Yeah.
You're perched on the edge of your seat, waiting to see that flash in the tree light.
Yeah. Unless you've never done contemplative prayer or bird watching, in which case you show up and you're like, oh, I'm bored.
Oh,
It's a training. There's a discipline to it.
see, I remember doing bird watching with my grandfather. I came from a small town, and he would take me out, and we would walk on, beside the old train tracks,
Mm-hmm.
and he would be able to, do bird calls, and all of a sudden, you'd see a bird, and oh my goodness, it's a bluebird,
Yeah.
and it was just like, oh, so cool. So it resonated with me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I brought one of my all-time favorite books is The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henri Nouwen.
Oh, good.
So a lot of people know who Henri Nouwen is. He's famous. He was involved in academia, but then he retired and became a pastor at the large Daybreak community in Canada. Written a bunch of great books. This book looks at the story of the prodigal son through, what was a unique lens. Some people may be familiar with some of his insights because they've been sort of recycled through Tim Keller's work on the prodigal son. But I would argue that, it sort of started with Henri Nouwen. My guess is Tim Keller probably read Henri Nouwen's book, and then that turned into this.
Yeah.
And so there's actually a really neat section in here where he's talking about going to this museum in Russia and looking at the actual Rembrandt painting, which is on the cover of the book. And so I was like, I have to get, after reading this several times, I was like, I have to get a copy of the painting. So I actually have a copy of The Prodigal Son in my home.
Oh, that's awesome. Where do you have it?
It's in the dining room. It's in my dining room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when we sit down and eat. But I wanted to read just a couple passages here. So one of the things I think he does a really good job of is I think whenever we get taught the parable, it's easy to go, well, I didn't run away and do all these rebellious things like the prodigal son. So, I guess I'm supposed to show compassion to those people. And we sort of associate ourselves with the father. And what he does a good job of, he goes through and he talks about each of the different characters and helps you sort of see the parable through their eyes. And so the elder son is a really important part of the book when he's talking about, judging, and which I think is a lot more Christians have actually are elder brothers than they are prodigal sons.
Right.
But there's a passage in here that this will just show you. I literally have Indian money in here because the last time I had this, I was in India, and so I have.
There's a story there.
Yeah, I have 1,000 rupee note from India.
That is your bookmark.
Yeah, it is my bookmark. But there's a passage in here where he's talking about he's learning to understand the impulse and the reason why the prodigal son wanted to go home so much, even though he knew that he had he'd done these horrible things to his father, and he says. A voice, weak it seemed, whispered that no human being would ever be able to give me the love I craved, that no friendship, no intimate relationship, no community would ever be able to satisfy the deepest needs of my wayward heart. That soft but persistent voice spoke to me about my vocation, my early commitments, the many gifts I had received in my father's house. That voice called me son. And so he goes on and talks in that light. And again, I would argue this is one of those books that when you read it, brings you healing in ways that you didn't know you needed it.
Wow.
So I would really encourage people if they're dealing with, disappointment, anger, frustration, maybe feeling like their life hasn't turned out the way they wanted it to, questioning life choices. It's a really good book to read. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Brings up an interesting point about when books meet us. There are certain books that meet us at certain times and certain seasons in our lives.
I picked it up because I wanted to do a series on parables that Jesus taught, and I thought, this would be a good one. I'll read about sort of a parable of the prodigal son sort of thing, and it hit me right between the eyes. So was not prepared for that. I thought it was going to be some sort of academic analysis of the parable of the prodigal son. It's more of an examination of my own heart. So it was really good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's go to the mailbag.
Okay.
Mailbag. This is from Hamilton. I'm not sure where Hamilton is from, but Hamilton wrote us. Thanks for writing, Hamilton. And he had several choices, including Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. He also said Gilead.
Okay.
And Silent Spring by Rachel Carlson.
Ooh, yeah.
Kind of a start to eco-literature.
Yeah.
Really important book for thinking about creation care in some ways. And the first book on his list is Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr., and Hamilton writes that this is a powerful, necessary readings from a prophetic voice whose sermons are relevant 60 years later. I pulled down my copy of Strength to Love, and I was looking at it just this morning. The first sermon in there is called A Tough Mind and a Tender Heart, which is a fantastic title. And the kind of last lines of the sermon are, at times we need to know that the Lord is a God of justice. When slumbering giants of injustice emerge in the earth, we need to know that there is a God of power who can cut them down like the grass and leave them withering like the green herb. But there are also times, I'm skipping a little bit, but there are also times when we need to know that God possesses love and mercy. When we are staggered by the chilly winds of adversity and battered by the raging storms of disappointment, and when through our folly and sin we stray into some destructive far country and are frustrated because of our strange feelings of homesickness, we need to know that there is someone who loves us, cares for us, understands us, and will give us another chance. So that combination of the power of love and justice, right? A tough mind and a tender heart. I thought it was a great choice. Thank you, Hamilton.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Silent Spring. You have a book there that kind of fits in with that.
You're right.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah. So this is by the agrarian writer Wendell Berry. Oh my goodness! I could have picked so many books.
I know. Yeah, you could just close your eyes and point at one.
Yeah. I'm not going to mention. I will mention it. J. Burr Crow.
Okay.
That book, I just wept when I read that book. I remember exactly where I was. That's not what I brought. I brought a collection of essays by Wendell Berry called "What Are People For?" And there's an essay in here where he's talking about one of his teachers, Wallace Stegner. And I just, the way he talks about his teacher, first of all, is really, really powerful. But there's this line in here that has stuck with me. And I think of it a lot when I think about teaching. Teachers we're often required to account for what we've done, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's important. This, in teacher talk, this is called assessment.
Yeah.
And but there's a flip side to that, and that is there are some impacts that a teacher has that cannot be assessed.
Yeah.
Essentially, and this is a point that Wendell Berry's making. He says there is, thank God, no teacher meter. And there's never going to be one. A teacher's major contribution may pop out anonymously in the life of some ex-student's grandchild.
Wow.
Right? To think about that as a teacher.
Yeah.
Like what you're doing may have this thing that you can absolutely never see.
Yeah.
So far removed from you. And then he says, a teacher finally has nothing to go on but faith. A student, nothing to offer in return but testimony. It's just really, really great.
Yeah.
So, but so much good stuff from Wendell Berry.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that leads me. That makes me want to talk about one book, but I actually want to detour and talk about this one first. So I brought The Question of God by Armand Nicholi Jr. This was a series of lectures that he did. I actually picked this book up when I was in college, and it's something that I've come back to a couple times, and particularly from the standpoint of if there's ever a moment where I really start to feel like I'm questioning my faith. And even if you get to a point where it's not that you don't think that God exists, but that you kind of feel like it would be great if you didn't have to bother with all that, and you just kind of get fed up with church and with people and stuff, and so I've constantly in my life had to come back to say, like, no, I can't convince myself that Jesus wasn't real and that he wasn't the Son of God, and I believe that. No matter how convenient or easy some of the temptations to sort of dismiss all that are. And so one of the things I love about this book when I come back and reread it is the way that he contrasts Sigmund Freud's view on life and his teaching on morality with C.S. Lewis. And so it's good.
We got back to the Wade Center.
Yeah, well, the Wade Center. Yeah. So it's a book where he's contrasting Freud against Lewis, and he's basically saying, like, here are these great intellectual giants of the 20th century, and they produce all these works, and they were kind of talking about each other a lot. I mean, Lewis writes about Freud, but they never had any sort of exchange or, discussion. They didn't show up at a lecture hall and have a debate or something. And
Right.
so he's kind of like, what if we, kind of let them debate each other, but, by like, let's placing their writings in contrast with each other.
Yeah.
And so it is a really strong sort of like atheist worldview versus Lewisian sort of worldview. And what I love about it is he's really kind of taking these two worldviews of the 20th century that are constantly fighting against each other and putting them in dialogue with each other. And there's a passage in here that I knew we were going to talk about this, and so I picked it up and I started rereading it again.
Yes.
And I wanted to quote it. So he says, he's talking about Lewis and the Tao and the abolition of man. And he says, Lewis says that throughout history, people took for granted that everyone knew the moral law by nature. Lewis reminds us that during the last World War, we took for granted that the Nazis knew what they did was wrong. They knew the moral law, and they knew they broke it. We tried them and found them guilty. What was the sense in saying the enemy were in the wrong, Lewis asks, unless right is a real thing, which the Nazis at bottom knew as well as we did and ought to have practiced. And so he makes a really good point in here, and he sort of brings out Lewis's teachings on it, is this idea that it's really easy to dismiss that people do things that are wrong and they have no awareness of it. They think that they're in the right the whole time. I think that's a very popular perspective. You see that a lot in movies,
Absolutely.
Villains aren't evil anymore. They're just, sincerely
Right.
convinced of the wrong thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. Lately, I've just been kind of feeling like, no, I think people sometimes know that they're doing something wrong and they come up with ways to justify it, but
Right.
there's something deep down in them that's telling them you shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, it's a good book to reread. It's not a novel, but it is a good one to go back if you ever feel like you need a really good. It gives you sort of a good black and white contrast between like these two worldviews of like atheism versus a winning case for Christianity. So,
Wow. Great. Yeah. Check that out.
yeah,
You mentioned The Abolition of Man, which was number one on another of our mailbag listeners' lists.
interesting.
Yes. Jared
Okay.
wrote in and gave us his top books. So number one, he said, was The Abolition of Man, which, what a book. And by the way, the Wade Center actually has one of the books that C.S. Lewis is responding to in The Abolition of Man. It's called The Green Book.
Yeah, we've talked about that before on the podcast.
I'm sure you have. So, but if you want to see The Green Book, you can come to the Wade Center and see it for yourself. Another of Jared's choices is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck.
Okay.
And Jared writes that he's a teacher. I've taught high school English for 20 years, and I've been lucky to teach this book for most of them. That's cool. I was an avid reader growing up, he says, and a part of why I chose teaching was because I wanted the chance to share some of the great stories with students. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of passing on
definitely
a legacy or kind of the great things of the past.
Yeah. I think that's core. I think that's core to teaching is, I think at the best teachers are people who just want to tell you about what they've learned.
Yeah, and what they love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a book over there that's open. Do you want to talk about that one next, or?
I think I want to talk about...
Well, you've got two books, I guess.
I got two books that are open. I think I want to talk about Piranesi.
Okay. Piranesi. What is that? I've never heard of that.
Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Susanna Clarke is an amazing writer, fantasy writer.
Okay.
She wrote a big book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Okay.
And it is just fantastic. This book is very different, but I love it. It is such a tender story. It's about a fellow. He's a solitary fellow. He lives in a house, and the house there's sky above, there's water below. There are all of these rooms. They have statues in them, and he's basically alone.
Oh, wow.
Not totally alone, but basically alone.
That reminds me of the Myst video game that I played when I was a kid.
A little bit. Oh, I played that too. What a game.
Yeah. Sorry. Side note.
No, going all over that island. But yeah, so he's kind of moving through this house, and he loves the house. He finds solace there. And he's got a journal, and he is it's almost like a natural history journal. He's trying to catalog what he sees about this place. But there's much more going on than that. It turns out it's very much a fantasy story. And in some ways, it's, without spoiling anything, it's about the disenchantment of the world. But I mentioned this book because one of the opening quotations, one of the epigraphs, is from The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. I am the great scholar, the magician, the adept, who is doing the experiment. Of course, I need subjects to do it on. This is one of the opening quotations. And at one point in this book, one of the statues, and this is early on in the book, so I don't think it's going to be too problematic for me to tell you. I hope not. One of the statues is this. This is the main character speaking. There are some statues that I love more than the rest. The woman carrying a beehive is one. Another, perhaps the statue that I love above all the others, stands at the door between the 5th and 4th northwestern halls. You get the sense of the magnitude of this house.
Wow.
It is a statue of a faun, a creature half man and half goat, with a head of exuberant curls. He smiles slightly and presses his forefinger to his lips. I have always felt he meant to tell me something, or perhaps to warn me of something. Quiet, he seems to say. Be careful. But what danger could there possibly be? I have never known. Then the main character says this. I dreamt of him once. He was standing in a snowy forest and speaking to a female child. So this is a book I think that Lewis lovers will love.
Yeah.
It's really...
I'm very intrigued. How do you spell that?
This is Susanna Clarke, Piranesi. It's Piranesi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Piranesi. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Do. I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah. I have a book that is far from a novel as you can get. And it's the kind of book that you get forced to read in a theology class. And I think a lot of people hated it and just moved on. But I keep coming back to it and rereading it, and particularly sections of it. And it's really helped me gain a better mental understanding of God. And so it's called The One, the Three, and the Many, God, Creation, and the Culture of Modernity by Colin Gunton. And it was a series of lectures that he did called the Bampton Lectures. And again, it's pretty academic. It's I would say if you haven't never read any academic theology, it's not for the faint of heart. But
I say dive in.
Yeah,
dive in.
But it's really good. What essentially he's trying to do is he's trying to compare and contrast different tendencies of us to see God as monotheistic, the one, versus the Trinity, the three, and how theology tends to kind of go back and forth between those two extremes, neither of which is orthodox. And so he's trying to find a way to sort of come to a better understanding of the Trinity, particularly in light of some of the problems that we're facing in modernity, one of which is sort of the way that man's humanity has been kind of, demeaned or torn apart by technology and community.
Sounds so relevant.
Yeah, community and social relationships are breaking down. And so towards the end of it, he kind of brings everything together and tries to synthesize it in a really good. I think he does it in a really great way.
And you've got like multiple colors of ink on that page. You've got little tabs and highlights.
Yeah, it's out of control. It's one of those, my professors would say, what's the point in underlining if you're going to underline everything on the page? Right. But you can note that I've come back to it multiple times because they're all different, it's different colors. It's like, there's one time he's using a red pen and one time it was a black pen. Anyways, so I wanted to read this one line because he gets to the end and essentially what he argues is, and I'll just read a couple parts here. He says, God he's neither a collectivity nor an individual, but a communion, a unity of persons in relation. And then what he essentially argues is because God is a communion, not a community of disparate persons, but a communion, which he goes into what that term means and how he's using it. You have to read the book. But he argues that to say that because that's who God is, then what it means for us to image God is then for us to be in communion. And when we're not in communion with other human beings and with God, then we just, like, it's not just that we're not, living out the image of God. We don't feel like ourselves. We're less than human somehow.
Yeah.
And so community and communion with others and with God is this really important thing that he argues. And he has a line in here. He says, first is that the heart of human being in action is a relationality whose dynamic is that of gift and reception. And essentially what he argues is that, and I wrote all his gift down on the bottom here. Essentially what he's arguing is that the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are constantly giving and receiving in and of themselves, and that is what communion is. That's how relationships are sort of created and maintained. And so his argument is, if we want to image God in the world, then it means that we need to be constantly giving and receiving with others. And we're giving what we've received from the Lord.
Yeah.
And then when we receive, we extend our thanks back to God for what we've received from them. And so, anyways, this really kind of brought me full circle with my favorite line from Paralandra, which is all his gift. So,
wow, that's awesome, and it brings together this theological notion of the Imago Dei, that we're creating the image of God with this central practice that we're told to do this. The Eucharist, participating in communion, and to see that one of the ways that we live out being made in the image of God is participating in the Lord's Supper. Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I didn't mention it last time because and this will lead up to the book you're going to mention next. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his one of his doctoral dissertations called Sanctorum Communio, he spends a lot of time talking about this, and then also in Creation and Fall. He says that we should view the image of God through an analogy of relation, not an analogy of being. And the idea is what defines us as being created in the image of God is not that we have an intellect or that we have a will. It's not some sort of aspect of our being. Because then you look at people that are, disabled in some way, or, struggling with, don't have the same mental capacities. And it's easy to just dehumanize them because they don't have the same freedom or will or intellect that somebody else does. And so he argues, that it's an analogy of relation. It's that, relationship with God and relationship with others is what defines us. And so Bonhoeffer, that was a big part of Bonhoeffer. So he really believed in that idea of community and communion. So
the book I brought, which is a well-known Bonhoeffer book, is Life Together. There's just so much to love about this book. This book unlocked a lot of things for me. And I just want to give you one example of it.
Yeah.
At one point, Bonhoeffer is writing, he's talking about the Psalms. And he writes, the Psalter is the prayer book of Jesus in the truest sense of the word. He prayed the Psalter, and now it has become his prayer for all time. I love that. For me, that opened a doorway to understanding the Psalms. This is Jesus praying through these things. And we are invited into that prayer and the life of prayer. And it helped me make sense of the differences in the Psalms. Some praising God, others more like the imprecatory Psalms, these Psalms of judgment. Who can pray those things? And, Christ is praying these things. And
you can when you're angry.
Oh, and that's true, right? That's true. And they speak to the full range of human experience in Christ. Which is just really, really cool, really powerful. So lots of stuff like that. From Life Together.
Lots of good stuff in Life Together. Yeah, definitely. I wanted to mention, I didn't get a chance to mention this last time, but The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton.
One of my favorite Chesterton books.
Really great. I think this is the first G.K. Chesterton book that I read.
Wow, what a place to start.
I know, right? So it was one of those moments where I had read some books by Lewis, and then I discovered that he, was friends with Tolkien, and then I read somewhere that he had been influenced by G.K. Chesterton. So this is 2001, 2002. So I went to a Barnes & Noble.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, I guess I got to find a book by G.K. Chesterton. I picked this book off the shelf. It was the only one that they had. And I start reading it. And it's one of those books where, I don't know, man, the first time you read this and you're like a couple chapters and you're like, what is happening? And there's so many twists and turns and it's really strange. But then at the end of it, when, he finally meets Sunday and, everybody, all the different days of the week are there and stuff. The way it ends, you're kind of like, what just what just happened? It almost feels like it was a strange dream yourself that he had. And so, but I just wanted to read the last line here. Again, I would argue that this is one of those books that you get really absorbed in it, but it helps you see the world through a different lens. Kind of like Gilead, it makes you more perceptive of the things that you're seeing, and makes you kind of question the ways in which you intuit motives to people. That's one of the interesting things in the book is he's constantly, because he's playing this spy game. Anyway, so at the end he meets Sunday, and he says he had turned his eyes so as to see suddenly the great face of Sunday, which wore a strange smile. "Have you," he cried in a dreadful voice, "have you ever suffered?" And then he goes on, reads this great line here where he gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and he says it grew larger and larger, filling the whole sky. Then everything went black. Only in the blackness, before it entirely destroyed his brain, he seemed to hear a distant voice saying commonplace text that he had heard somewhere: "Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of?"
It's hard to. I don't think that will be a spoiler for our readers.
No, it's
but when you get to that point in the book, it's like crazy.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what just happened? Yeah, it's a really great book. I recommend, if you haven't read The Man Who Was Thursday by G. Chesterton, it's a good weekend read. It's not a super long book either.
You know, in some ways, one of the things you said there took us back to a kind of a theme for this lesson, which is really about the ways in which books help us pay attention.
Yeah.
The way they're teaching us to attend to particular things. You know, we saw that with Gilead and bird watching. So there's something important these particular books, I think, are teaching us about paying attention.
Yeah.
The writer Mary Oliver has a line. She says, "Attention is the beginning of devotion." And I just love that line, right?
Yeah.
The things we pay attention to are the things that we are going to love. They're the things that we're going to worship. And learning how to pay attention well is like so important.
Yeah, and in the world that we live in, where we're constantly sort of doom scrolling on social media and stuff.
Exactly.
I know I struggle with this. The days and the weeks end up just kind of blurring together because you never give your mind time to rest and to think and to process the world outside your window, because you're just, sort of scrolling through, reading all the horrible things that are happening in the day, or looking at cat videos. But, that moment of awareness and reflection, it's like, it's just refreshing to your mind.
Yeah, it is. Ways to cultivate attention. That's something that I want to get better at.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place to end.
I think so, yeah.
This second of two.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that someday there'll be a third.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, this could be a trilogy.
Yeah, everything's got to be a trilogy, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe readers, listeners, my goodness, readers. Listeners, do you have other books that you think we should reread? Feel free to write in.
Yeah.
Where would they reach us, Aaron?
At our email address, wade@wheaton.edu.
That's it. That's the one. All right, man. I think we're going to call this one done.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. The Wade Center podcast is a production of the Marion E. Wade Center at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. If you enjoy the podcast and the content we offer, please leave us a review on iTunes, tell your friends, and consider making a donation to the Wade. The Wade Center is entirely self-funded. Financial gifts help support the expert services, past collections, and varied programming we offer at no cost. If you have questions about the podcast or suggestions for future episodes, please email us at wade@wheaton.edu or contact us via Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. To learn more about the Wade Center, our 7 British Christian authors, what we offer, and how to make a donation, visit our website at wheaton.edu/Wade.